For 3 years, I believed I had everything I could ever want. His name was Chris, and he was everything I had ever dreamed of, smart, successful, and with the kind of charm that made people stop and listen when he spoke. We had built a life together, moving from my small apartment to a cozy house in the suburbs. Everything was going as planned. We even talked about marriage. The first cracks began when I noticed that something wasn't quite right. He had started working longer hours, and his phone was always out of reach. At first, I chalked it up to stress from work, but deep down, I felt a gnawing doubt I couldn't ignore. One evening, after a late night at the office, I decided to surprise him with a home-cooked dinner. I came home early, and as I walked into our house, I noticed something strange. His phone was left on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a message. Her name was Samantha. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I saw the message preview. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll make sure he's asleep by 10. My heart dropped. I could feel the air leaving the room as I read those words. A cold, uncomfortable realization washed over me. My mind raced. Was he cheating? Was this really happening? I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and hurt. I started watching his every move, his habits, his texts, his calls, trying to piece together the truth. Everything pointed in one direction: he was having an affair. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted him. "Chris, is there something you want to tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had been holding in. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I think we need to talk." That was the moment he told me everything. He confessed to the affair, admitting that he had fallen in love with someone else. Samantha was a woman from his office. She was everything I wasn't. "She's different, okay? She makes me feel alive again. I don't want to hurt you, but I can't stay with you," he said. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The life I had built, the future I had imagined, was all shattered in an instant. But the worst part? He told me that he wanted to move in with her. I was left alone in our house, with the future I had worked so hard for suddenly slipping through my fingers. But that wasn't the end. The days following Chris's confession were a blur. I stayed in the house, surrounded by the life we had built together, but it felt like everything was in pieces. I had never imagined my world crumbling this way. There were moments when I just stared at the walls, wondering how I had missed all the signs. How could I have been so blind? How could someone I loved so much turn into someone capable of such betrayal? But I wasn't going to wallow forever. The first thing I did was take control. I packed up all of Chris's things, put them in boxes, and left them at the front door. I didn't want any reminders of the life I had lost. No more texts, no more promises. I was done. It wasn't easy. The anger came in waves, and every time I thought I had moved on, it would hit me again: the heartbreak, the betrayal. Chris had been my rock, the one person I thought I could rely on, and now he was gone, replaced by her. Samantha. The woman who seemed to have everything I didn't. At least that's what I thought. The first few weeks were the hardest. I tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't escape the memories of Chris. He had left, but the emotional scars he had left behind were still there. Still raw. Then, something unexpected happened. I ran into Samantha at a coffee shop. It wasn't planned, and I could tell by the way she froze when she saw me that it wasn't a coincidence. She was with a friend, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. There was an uncomfortable silence before she finally spoke. "You're still angry, aren't you?" she asked, almost too casually. I could feel the anger welling up inside me, but I didn't let it show. I took a deep breath and answered. "What do you want, Samantha?" She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "I didn't mean for it to happen. But Chris and we're happy together." I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something dark inside me: revenge. "I'm glad you're happy," I said with a forced smile. "But don't forget, you took something from me." The conversation was short, but in those few moments, I felt something shift inside me. I had been angry for so long, but now I felt something else, power. I had been hurt, but now I realized that the power to move on was in my hands. I decided right then and there that I wasn't going to be the victim. I wasn't going to sit around and let them think they'd won. I didn't know how yet, but I promised myself that I would get the last laugh. The next few weeks were a blur of self-improvement. I started working out again, meeting new people, and rebuilding my life. I made new friends, and I threw myself into my career. I was stronger than I had been before. And as I rebuilt my life, I began to notice something. Chris started watching. He would send me messages, asking how I was doing. He tried to call. He even showed up at my doorstep once, looking lost and regretful. But I wasn't ready to talk to him. I was focused now. Focused on the future, my future. And I knew, deep down, that when the time was right, I would make him beg for my forgiveness. Weeks turned into months, and as I focused on myself, something started happening. I started thriving. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive again. I threw myself into my work, I started dating again, and I began to see life in a new light. I wasn't just surviving, I was reborn. And then, just as I had started to feel like I was truly moving forward, Chris showed up. It was an evening in late spring. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the city, and I had just finished a meeting when I received a message from an unknown number. "Can we talk? I've made a huge mistake. I need to see you. Chris." I stared at the message for a moment, the words hitting me like a wave. Was he really asking for forgiveness? After everything he had done? He left me for her, the woman who had taken everything from me, and now he was crawling back. At first, I was tempted to ignore it. To continue living my life without him. But there was a part of me, deep down, that wanted to hear what he had to say. The meeting was set for the following day. I agreed to meet him, but I wasn't going to let him walk all over me again. I had changed, and I knew exactly how to handle this. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already sitting at a table, looking anxious and out of place. Gone was the confident man who had left me for Samantha. Now, he looked like a man who had lost it all. As I sat down across from him, he looked up at me, his eyes full of regret. "I've messed up, haven't I?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't answer right away. I could see the sadness in his eyes, but I wasn't about to give him an easy way out. I wanted him to understand what he had taken from me, what he had lost. "You did," I said quietly, but firmly. "You left me. You chose her over me. You destroyed everything we built." His face fell. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I was stupid. I thought I could find something better, but all I've found is regret. I miss you. I miss us. Please, can we start over?" I looked at him, searching his face for any signs that this was more than just guilt. Was this about him feeling sorry for himself, or did he truly want me back? But as I listened to him, I knew the truth. I had moved on. I wasn't the same person he had left behind. I had found strength and independence in his absence, and I didn't need him to validate my life anymore. "Chris," I said, leaning in slightly, "you had your chance. You left me. You chose her. And now, you want me back because she wasn't enough. But I'm not the woman you left anymore." He looked shocked, his eyes widening. He was speechless, trying to find the right words. But there was nothing he could say that would change what had happened. "You know," I continued, "sometimes, the best revenge isn't about hurting the other person. It's about becoming the person they wish they hadn't lost." His expression softened. For the first time, I could see the realization sink in. He understood. He had lost me, and now, it was too late. I stood up to leave, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in months. As I turned to walk away, I heard him call my name. "Wait. Are you sure?" I didn't turn back. I just smiled, knowing that the last laugh was mine. I had one. And as I walked out of that cafe, I felt the weight of the past finally lift off my shoulders. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when I was no longer the one who had been left behind. Weeks passed after our meeting, and things started to feel like they were finally back to normal. I continued to focus on myself, on my career, and on the life I was building. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but I kept pushing forward. I had my power back, a power I hadn't realized I had lost until it was too late. Chris, on the other hand, seemed to fade into the background. His attempts to reach out became fewer and fewer. He stopped texting me, and I didn't hear from him again. It was a relief, the final piece of closure I needed. But one evening, just as I was settling into a new routine, my phone rang. It was from a mutual friend of mine and Chris's. "Hey, I hate to bring this up, but have you heard from Chris recently? He's been struggling." The words hit me unexpectedly. Struggling? After everything that had happened? I wasn't sure how to feel. "He's been texting me about his relationship with Samantha," the friend continued. "He's devastated. He says he made a huge mistake, that she's not who he thought she was. And now he's blaming himself for everything." My heart tightened, but not out of sympathy. I was surprised by the emotion I felt. It was almost like a mixture of disbelief and vindication. Samantha wasn't the perfect woman Chris thought she was. She had fallen short, and now he was left with the consequences of his own actions. But I didn't want to get involved. I had walked away, and I wasn't about to get sucked into his mess again. "I'm sorry he's going through that," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But that's not my problem anymore. I don't owe him anything." I ended the call, feeling a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I was moving on. And this was just another reminder that I had made the right choice. The next few weeks went by, and I continued living my life. The past seemed more and more like a distant memory, fading into the background as I embraced the future. Then, out of nowhere, Chris showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was out shopping for groceries when I walked into the store and saw him standing there, leaning against a shelf, looking lost. His face softened when he saw me, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. He had the same eyes, the ones I used to love, but there was something different now. Something broken. He walked toward me, his steps hesitant, as if unsure of what to say or do. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever was coming next. "I know you're probably mad at me," he said quietly. "But I need to say this." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure I needed to hear him out again. But I allowed him to continue. "Samantha and it's over. She was never what I thought she was. I was just trying to fill a hole. I've messed up everything. And now, I know I made the biggest mistake of my life, letting you go." He looked at me, waiting for a response. I felt a familiar pang of hurt, but it wasn't the same anymore. This time, I wasn't desperate for his approval. I had moved on, and I wasn't the woman he had left behind. "I don't need your apology, Chris," I said, my voice firm. "You had your chance. You chose her. And now, you're left with the consequences of your choices." I saw the regret in his eyes, but I didn't feel pity. Instead, I felt empowered. I had finally found my voice. I wasn't the one who was hurt anymore, he was. With a final glance, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. And I didn't need to. I was done. And this time, I was walking away stronger than ever. The weeks after that encounter were quiet. Too quiet. It was as if the universe had finally given me the peace I had been craving for so long. I continued to live my life, not thinking about Chris or Samantha, not letting their drama pull me back into a past that had been nothing but a lesson. But life, as it often does, has a way of testing your resolve. It all started with a simple text message. From Chris. "I need to talk. It's about everything, you, me, and the mess I've made. I think I owe you an explanation." At first, I almost ignored it. After everything, what could he possibly have left to say? But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. I didn't expect anything. In fact, I had convinced myself that I wasn't going to get emotionally involved again. I was strong now, independent, and in a better place. I had moved on. We met at a cafe in the city. Chris was waiting for me when I arrived, looking exactly like the man I once knew, but with a sense of defeat that I had never seen before. There was no arrogance in his posture, no charm in his smile. He looked tired, older, and deeply regretful. He stood when I approached, offering me a half-hearted smile. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said as we sat down. "But I need you to understand why I did it. Why I walked away." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of how much of this I was willing to take in. He explained how everything with Samantha had started out perfectly. They had gone on trips together, shared experiences, and for a while, he felt like he had found someone who matched him in ways I couldn't. But as time went on, he started noticing things about her that didn't sit right. She was controlling, manipulative, and far from the perfect image he had in his mind. I thought she was everything I wanted, but I was wrong. I ended up feeling more trapped than ever. His eyes met mine, the sincerity in them undeniable. "When you left me, I realized how much I had messed up. I lost you, and I lost myself. I thought I could find happiness in someone else, but the truth is, I can't." I took a deep breath, the emotions welling up inside me. A part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. To hear the man who had torn my world apart admit his mistakes. To see him regret the decisions that had left me broken. But as I listened, I realized something important. This wasn't about me anymore. I had come so far since the betrayal. I had moved on, healed, and found my strength. Chris was now just a chapter in my past, a chapter that had been closed long ago. "You've learned a hard lesson, Chris. But that's not my problem anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You made your choice. And now, you live with it. But don't think for 1 second that I'll ever go back to you." His face fell, and for a moment, I saw that old Chris, the one who had once been so charming, so confident, break down in front of me. "I know," he whispered. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve forgiveness." I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle between us. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. I had given him my love once, but it wasn't enough. And now, he was giving me nothing but regret, and I was done. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Chris," I said as I stood to leave. "But you're not going to find it with me." As I walked away from that cafe, I realized something. This was the final step. Not only had I moved on, but I had also taken back the power that was once in his hands. He thought he could break me. But now, I knew, I was stronger than I ever thought possible. It had been months since I last saw Chris. Life was moving forward for me, and that was exactly what I wanted. There were no more nights spent wondering what went wrong. No more worrying about his betrayal or about the woman who had taken my place in his life. I had let it go. But the moment I least expected came when Samantha reached out. I hadn't heard from her since the day I saw her at the coffee shop months ago. The text she sent me that evening caught me completely off guard. "I need to speak to you. It's important. Can we meet?" My first instinct was to ignore it. I had no interest in reopening that chapter of my life. But something inside me told me this wasn't just about Chris anymore. It was about the woman who had taken everything. And whether I liked it or not, I realized that I had unfinished business with her. We met at a quiet park, far from the bustle of the city. Samantha was waiting for me on a bench, her posture stiff, like she wasn't sure how to approach me. There was a sense of hesitation in her demeanor, a vulnerability I hadn't seen in her before. As I approached, she stood up and met my gaze, but there was no hostility, no arrogance. Only regret. "I never expected you to be this strong," she said quietly, her voice almost apologetic. "When I stole Chris from you, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought he was what I needed. But I was wrong. I didn't realize what I was losing until it was too late. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift in tone. Samantha had always been the confident one, the one who seemed to have it all together, while I had been the one left behind. But now, she looked like someone who had been knocked off her pedestal. "I've seen what's been happening with you," she continued. "How you've rebuilt your life. How you've found success. I've watched you from afar. And I realized that maybe I should have respected what you had with Chris." For the first time, I felt a strange mix of sympathy and vindication. She wasn't apologizing for what she had done to me directly, but I could see it in her eyes, the regret, the recognition that she had taken something precious without realizing the full cost. But I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want to hear about her regrets. The only thing I cared about now was moving forward. "You made your choice, Samantha," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And so did I. You can't take back what you did, and I'm not interested in hearing about your regrets. I've moved on." There was no anger in my words, just finality. The woman who had once stolen my life away no longer had any power over me. Her eyes fell. She seemed to take in the weight of my words, and I saw a flicker of understanding pass through her. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. I see the strength you have. I should have recognized it before." For a moment, I thought about how much that sentence meant. It wasn't the apology I had been waiting for, but it was a recognition of who I had become. We both stood there, in the quiet of the park, acknowledging the past for what it was. It was a chapter closed. "Goodbye, Samantha," I said calmly. "I hope you find what you're looking for. But I'm not part of your journey anymore." As I walked away from her, I felt something powerful stir inside me. Closure. I wasn't the person I was when Chris left me. And I wasn't the person I was when Samantha came into my life. I was stronger, more self-assured, and more independent than I had ever been. And now, I had nothing left to prove. Life had a way of teaching me lessons, even when I wasn't looking for them. After all the emotional turmoil, the heartbreak, and the rebuilding, I thought I had finally put everything behind me. But sometimes, life has a way of bringing things back full circle. One afternoon, months after my last encounter with Samantha, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was a text from Chris. "Can we talk? It's important. I've made a huge mistake, and I need your help." I stared at the message, stunned. After everything that had happened, why now? Why was he reaching out? I had moved on. He was the past. I had built a new life, one I was proud of. But the message seemed different. It wasn't the usual guilt trip or plea for reconciliation. It was genuine. Or so it seemed. At first, I ignored it. But then, I couldn't help but feel that familiar pull of curiosity. He had asked for my help. I wondered what kind of help he could possibly need after everything he'd put me through. After some back and forth, I agreed to meet. But I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. This wasn't going to be about reopening old wounds. This was going to be about him explaining why he had come crawling back, and what I could gain from it. We agreed to meet at a local park, one that we had once frequented when we were still together. It was strange walking into that park again, but this time, I felt empowered. I wasn't walking in as the woman who had been left behind. I was walking in as someone who had reclaimed their power. When I arrived, I saw Chris sitting on a bench, his posture slumped, looking completely different from the confident man I had once known. He looked older, more tired, like the weight of regret had finally started to take its toll. His eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, guilt. "I didn't know if you'd agree to meet," he said, standing up as I approached. "But I had to ask. I need your help with something. And I need to make things right. I owe you that much." I crossed my arms, watching him closely. I had heard this all before. How many times had he apologized? How many times had he begged for forgiveness, only to repeat his mistakes? "You've made your choice, Chris. I'm not here to fix your life. I'm here because you asked for my help. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative this time. I controlled this conversation. He looked down, clearly frustrated with himself. I could see the desperation in his eyes. I know. But this is different. I made a huge mistake, and I need to fix it. I need your help to get back on track. I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This wasn't about forgiving him or giving him the chance to worm his way back into my life. This was about taking the upper hand, turning the tables, and making him work for what he had taken. What exactly do you need from me? I asked, my voice steady but curious. He hesitated before finally speaking, his voice quieter now. I've lost everything. My career, my reputation. Samantha, she left me, too. She wasn't the person I thought she was. I'm asking for a second chance at my life, but I don't know where to start. In that moment, I realized something important. Chris wasn't asking for my forgiveness, he was asking for a way out. But this time, he wasn't going to get a free pass. You've lost everything because of your own choices, I said, my voice calm but firm. And now you want me to help you fix it? I've helped myself, Chris. I didn't need you to do that for me, and I'm not going to do it for you. For a moment, there was silence. He looked like he had expected me to offer him comfort, but I wasn't here for that. I was here for my own closure, and this was the final step in taking back my power. You're going to have to figure it out on your own, I said, standing up to leave. But don't think for a second that you can come back into my life just because it's convenient for you. You made your bed, now lie in it. As I turned to walk away, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wasn't looking for apologies. I had finally realized that my happiness didn't depend on his mistakes. Chris might have fallen from grace, but I wasn't going to let that define me. I had moved on. And that was the most powerful thing I had learned. The weeks that followed my conversation with Chris were a turning point. As much as he wanted me to fix his life, I realized that I was no longer the person who was dependent on his validation or his mistakes. I had let go of the anger, the hurt, and the feeling of betrayal. I had moved on. And that was exactly what I needed. I threw myself into my work even more. I had become an entrepreneur, and I wasn't going to let the past dictate my future. It wasn't about revenge or getting back at Chris anymore. It was about focusing on the life I was building for myself, and for the first time, it felt like my own. But the silence from Chris didn't last long. Just as I was finally feeling settled, he reached out again. It was a simple text. I need your help one last time. At first, I didn't even want to read it. I had already given him more than enough of my time and energy. But something nagged at me. A part of me wanted to know why he was suddenly asking for my help again after all the damage he'd done. So, I decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. We met, but this time, it wasn't a cafe. We met at my office, a neutral space where I could maintain control of the situation. When he arrived, he looked tired, even more defeated than the last time I saw him. There was no bravado, no charm. Just a man who had lost it all. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said as he sat down across from me. But I need to tell you something. His eyes were tired, filled with regret. It was almost like I could see the weight of his actions crushing him. But as much as I could feel empathy, I knew this was no longer my problem. I know I can't change the past. I've messed up. I lost my career, my reputation, and Samantha. I'm not asking you to fix it for me. But I need advice. I need to know how you managed to pick yourself back up after I destroyed everything. I leaned back in my chair, watching him closely. Chris was the one who had always been in control, always the one making the decisions for both of us. And now, here he was, asking me, the person he had abandoned, for help. But I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindictive. What I felt was relief. Relief that I had finally found my own path. You want my advice? I said, my voice calm. Here's the truth. I stopped letting people like you control my life. You took everything from me, but I didn't let that define who I became. I rebuilt myself, but you're the one who has to rebuild your life. I can't do that for you." There was no anger in my voice, no bitterness. Just truth. Chris had always been the one to control the narrative of our relationship. But now, I was in control of mine. He sat in silence for a moment, processing my words. Then, he nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I needed to hear that. I've spent so much time trying to fix everything for myself, but maybe I need to start by fixing who I am first." For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope for him. Maybe, just maybe, Chris would finally understand what he needed to do. But it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had moved on, and whatever he did from this point on was up to him. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "Good luck, Chris," I said, turning toward the door. "But remember, I'm not your redemption. You have to find that on your own." As I walked out of my office, I felt lighter than I had in months. I hadn't just let go of Chris. I had let go of everything that weighed me down. I was no longer the person who had been betrayed. I was the person who had taken control of my own life. Life moved on. Chris had done everything I expected him to do, try to make amends, but fall short. He reached out a few more times, asking for my advice, seeking my forgiveness, but it wasn't the man I remembered. It was a man who had lost everything, and in his desperation, he tried to cling to whatever he could. But I knew better now. I had built my life back from the ground up, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even him, take it away from me again. I continued to focus on my business. Things were going well, better than I had ever imagined. My career was flourishing, and I had surrounded myself with a new circle of supportive people who understood what it meant to be there for each other. I had learned the importance of creating relationships based on respect and mutual growth, not control and manipulation. But still, Chris's face occasionally flickered in my thoughts. I wondered, sometimes, if he would ever truly learn from his mistakes. If he would ever realize the depth of the damage he had caused, not just to me, but to himself. Then, one day, months after the last meeting, I got an invitation. It was a formal invite to an event, a business gala. The invitation came from a name I recognized, Chris's new company. He had somehow managed to rebuild himself, just as he had promised. He had created a new tech startup, and he was hosting a high-profile event to launch it. For a moment, I was tempted to ignore the invite. But then I realized something: I had earned this moment. He had tried to take everything from me, but I had outlasted him. I had reclaimed my life, my power, and my happiness. And this gala? It was my chance to show him, and everyone else, just how far I had come. The night of the event, I walked into the grand ballroom with confidence radiating from me. The room was filled with high-profile entrepreneurs, investors, and tech moguls. And there he was, standing at the front, giving a speech. His eyes landed on me the moment I walked in, and for a brief second, I saw the look of surprise and regret flash across his face. But I didn't flinch. I didn't walk in to make him feel guilty. I walked in to show him that I had moved on. I had built my empire. And I wasn't going to let his presence distract me from the life I had created. As I made my way through the crowd, people stopped to introduce themselves. I was greeted with respect, with admiration. I was no longer just a woman who had been left behind. I was the woman who had found her way back. Chris eventually came over to speak with me. His attempt at small talk was awkward, and he fumbled over his words as if trying to find the right way to express his regret. But I didn't need his words anymore. The success I had built spoke louder than anything he could say. "I see you've done well for yourself," he said, his voice faltering. "I knew you would. I'm sorry for everything." I smiled, a quiet confidence in my eyes. "It's not about what you think, Chris. It's about what I've done. I didn't need your apology, and I didn't need your validation. I needed myself. And now, I'm exactly where I need to be." The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He understood. he understood that I didn't need him anymore. I didn't need anything from him. I had moved past the betrayal, past the heartache, and had built something that was uniquely mine. As I walked away from him, I felt at peace. The last chapter of my story with Chris had closed. I had won. Not because of revenge, not because of bitterness, but because I had become stronger than I had ever been before. And as I stood there, looking at the life I had created, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. It had been almost a year since that night at the gala. Since then, my life had changed in ways I never thought possible. I had reclaimed my power. I had become the woman I always knew I could be, but never fully embraced. And now, I was living that truth every single day. Chris was still out there, trying to rebuild his life. I heard through mutual friends that he had grown his company, but it wasn't the same as it used to be. He wasn't the confident, self-assured man I had once known. He had become someone else, someone who had learned the hard way that there was a cost to every decision. I couldn't help but think about how much he had lost in the process. And for the first time, I felt no anger. Only indifference. Sarah, my best friend, had been right by my side throughout this journey. She was there when I needed to cry, and she was there when I needed to laugh. She had seen me through the darkest parts of my heartbreak and was with me every step of the way as I built myself back up. Now, as we sat together in a cafe one afternoon, sipping coffee and talking about life, I realized how much I had grown. "You know," Sarah said, looking at me with a smile, "I've always admired how you handled everything. You went through so much, and look at you now. I can't believe you've built all this by yourself." I smiled at her, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. She had seen the journey. She knew the pain I'd been through, but she had also seen the strength I had discovered in myself. I had come full circle. "I've learned that we can't control what happens to us," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "But we can control how we react. And when we stop letting the past define us, that's when we start to truly live." As Sarah and I talked more about the future, about our plans, about the lives we were creating, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't worried about Chris anymore. I wasn't worried about the drama of the past. What mattered now was what I was doing today, and what I was building for tomorrow. It wasn't just about professional success or career growth. It was about the life I had crafted for myself, a life of freedom, strength, and independence. I didn't need a man to validate me. I didn't need anyone's approval to feel fulfilled. The power was in my hands, and that was all I needed. That evening, I found myself standing at the window of my apartment, looking out over the city skyline. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. For the first time in years, I felt whole. My journey had been long, filled with challenges, heartbreak, and self-discovery. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. No one can take away your power unless you let them. I wasn't the same person I was when Chris left. And I wasn't the same person I was when I met him in that coffee shop months ago. I had evolved. I had become the woman I was always meant to be. As I looked out at the city, I knew there were more challenges ahead. But I wasn't afraid. I had already faced the hardest battles. And now, it was time to embrace the future, not as the woman who had been left behind, but as the woman who had taken control of her own destiny. With that thought, I smiled to myself, knowing that the best was yet to come.